Welcome to the fresh and vibrant airwaves of the Pride and Promotion podcast. Strap in and turn up the volume because you've landed on the podcast that's setting the bar for the most dynamic and inclusive marketing conversations. Join your host, Joseph Federico, as he prepares to dive into the world of marketing with an inclusive twist where we spotlight the LGBT community and celebrate the power of diversity. Get ready to be motivated as we bring in some of the most influential LGBT entrepreneurs and marketing trailblazers who are reshaping the.
Everybody, I am Joe Federico of J Federico Marketing and the host of Pride and Promotion podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today we have a very special guest, a very talented queer artist, one of my closest friends in the world of literature, Marcus James. Marcus James, please introduce yourself and welcome to the Pride and Promotion podcast.
Well, first of all, Joseph, thank you for having me. Thanks
pleasure.
for asking. I greatly appreciate it. Little bit about me. So, as you said, my name's Marcus James. I guess I would describe myself as a primarily Pacific Northwest Gothic horror author / horror mance or horror romance. So like kind of like Poppy Z Bright. So like stuff's gory. I almost said the other word, but I was like, can we use foul language? I wasn't sure. I'm trying to be good. So a bunch of other stuff. And it tends to be gory and creepy and scary, but it's still at the heart always has a romance because, I mean, who doesn't love two boys running off together?
Yes, sum me up.
I've written 9 novels, and I've contributed to about a dozen or close to a dozen short story anthologies with Allison Books. Which RIP, they're no longer around, but they were like the Knopf Random House of queer publishers back in the day. And unfortunately, the recession of 2008 decimated, a lot of queer publishers and bookstores. And unfortunately, Allison was one of them. And, but I actually got my first, start before my first novel came out. I first really got my publishing credits writing mostly gay erotica. So, quite spicy. All my books have sex scenes in them because I believe that, you should take the reader through every aspect of the character's story. Now, I don't believe in throwing sex scenes in for shock, so I never have anything for shock. So one book might have 1, another might have 4. It just depends on if it's moving the characters and the story forward and it's natural or organic.
I was just going to say that exactly because we're just going to jump all around, tonight.
Yeah, of course.
I would have to say as somebody, well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show and for allowing me, when I wrote my first book, Voodoo Juice, to allow me to feel more comfortable writing my prose and not just using the community as a shock factor, right?
Right.
And this is even before like social media really kind of blew up, which we can get to in a few moments. But definitely we're all adults here. The sex scenes should move the characters along within the story, not just to put them in for the shock value.
Correct. So, and I will say that one of the things that why I ended up becoming a regular with Allison and their various anthologies is because my challenge is I can't just write there's a lot of in all the anthologies that I contributed to. There are amazing stories in there that are just really for the sex, right? Like it's the story is just about getting to that scene in the alley with the trucker or whatever's going on, right? And then you have to get to me, and I can't just have sex for sex sake. I just can't. I emotionally don't work that way. There has to be something passionate and intense fueling it. And lust on its own can do that. But when, as a novelist, as a writer, my challenge was, okay, I get like 15, 20 pages available to me. How can I fit an entire novel in 15 to 20 pages? And so
A lot of
whenever you
editing. A lot
read
of editing.
so whenever you read any of my short stories from Allison, um, it's like you're walking into a novel that you've been reading, and you just happen to now, today's the day you've picked up the book, and you just happen to now
Mhm.
be reading the chapter where the sex scene finally happens between the characters. And so
Sure.
there's complex situations, there's backstory that I give you with every character that's very complex. One of the stories was one of the ones I'm really proud of, was in Best Gay Erotica, or Ultimate Gay Erotica 2007. And
Mhm.
it was about identical brothers, identical twin brothers, adult
Hmm.
brothers. So I just want to be clear, they're adults who grew up in
Yes, please.
Hollywood with like Hollywood parents, very sheltered, and it's an incest
Mhm.
story. And
Oh.
it's yeah, and I won an award for it, like because
Oh.
it was very intense. And then another one I
Mhm.
did um, was I believe in Best Gay Love Stories 2009, and it is about two boys in Missouri, teenage boys in Missouri who you're like, oh, cute. Like, it's like they have this romance and they're like, well, what's going on? And then they kill their parents and take off.
Well, you need the
And,
intrigue and the movie in these books too,
right.
right?
But that's not normal. But then you go like to the story before mine, or you go to the story after mine in these
Right.
anthologies. And then they all just go back to like being normal smut. And then like there would always be mine. And so I got really known really fast, and luckily at the time I had an agent. I signed with my first agent when I was 19.
Mhm.
And so at the time that I was with Allison, I luckily had an agent. So that became a marketing where it was like, um, I was at the time, what would have been a queer outlaw, a queer
Mhm.
rebel. It was
Yes.
still very, back. So
Yes.
this would have been like 04, 05, oh 03, 04, 05. And, it was still very like, queer was still very much a rebellious word to use if you were gay. Like if
Mhm.
you were like, I'm
Definitely.
queer, you were like you were an outlaw. You were like you were punk. You were gonna like you were gonna fuck up the system in some way, and you were gonna break boundaries. You were gonna be transgressive. And it's funny to see how that's now, how so homogenized that word has now become. Um,
Exactly.
but back when I started, yeah, it was a rebellious time to be that word, to say that you were.
But isn't the point, especially now, and I myself am a novelist, I'm a social media marketer, I'm a television, personality, a
Mhm.
podcaster, right? The evolution. The point now, as we get older, we are less naive, is to continue, at least in my opinion, no matter what facet of the community you're a part of or profession, is to be an outlaw. Number one.
Correct.
But I want to go back and tie this back to marketing because you said something important. Back in 04, 05, 06, 07, 09, there wasn't a lot of social media and marketing. How did you market the books and yourself and getting an agent? I really want to delve into that because there wasn't a
Okay.
Twitter. There
So,
wasn't this. No, I need to know. I need to know.
all right. So, we're gonna hop back into the Marcus James time machine. And to
Let's
do that,
buckle up. We're there. We're
we
there.
have to go back to before I was even 16 years old. We have to go back to when I was a little kid and was like a natural storyteller. And I came from
Mhm.
a very interesting family. And uh, part of that background is Irish. And in that tradition, there's a lot of storytelling.
Mhm.
And so I grew up in an environment in a family where it was the 80s. My mom was young. She had siblings, my aunts and uncle. They were also
Mhm.
young. they hung out with with their cousins, my second cousins, their first cousins, who were also young, like tweens, teens. And it
Mhm.
was the 80s. So I grew up in this house where we always had Guns N' Roses playing. We always had horror movies on the VHS. Um, there was just this influence of imagination where you could just be like my mom. We would watch, WWF and WCW because they were separate
Yeah.
at the time.
Mhm.
And my mom would whip out her lipstick and paint on me and my brother's faces so we could and it was just one of those times where it was just all young, like kids, and good and bad, a kid, and a
Yeah.
bunch of kids. It was almost like we were like the Lost Boys in this crazy way.
Mhm.
Uh, Even though we had like my aunts, my grandma, and my uncle, they were also just like, whatever. Like we're all weird and spooky and strange. So
Sure.
I grew up being able to flourish in my imagination, and
Mhm.
I originally thought I was in preschool. I was going to be an actor, and so I immediately was like, I'm going to be an actor, and then that lasted all of like till second grade, and then I saw PBS cooking shows and fell in love with cooking and
Mhm.
immediately like became super passionate with that and was like, I'm going to have a cooking show on PBS. That's my life plan. I'm going to own 3 restaurants in downtown Seattle. I'm going to live above Pike Place Market. Like I had this whole fantasy and I was still writing, but I would be writing for fun. I wasn't taking it seriously. Um, and then the first real lightning bolt moment was in the 4th grade. I had been saving up for the unabridged Dracula at the Scholastic
Oh,
Library Book Fair.
yes,
And
those were the best.
right all year.
I want to go back
And
for adults. So hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I had like saved, and then I buy it, and I at lunchtime, and I go back into my classroom, and my teacher, Mrs. Roseman, who was amazing, it's an amazing woman. She had Lasher, which had just come out. So that was
Mhm.
like been Anne Rice's latest release. R.A.P. I can't.
Rest in
We'll
peace.
get into
Yep.
that is happening. Um, that is pivotal in this moment. So Lasher was sitting there, and my teacher says to me, "Oh, I see you got Dracula. Like that's such a big book. Are you sure you can, And she was like, "But I'm sure you can read it because I was always very much ahead. So I
Mhm.
have a learning disability in math and science, pretty bad learning disability.
Mhm.
Um, but in arts or in literature, English literature comprehension, composition. When I would get tested every year, and my comprehension in that was always 4 grades higher than where I was.
I'm
Um,
not surprised. Yeah.
yeah, which I guess is why, like, I was so shitty in math and science because I was so good over here.
But
And
but you found your niche. You found your niche early on and you went with it.
yeah, and so she was like, "Have you ever?" She goes, "Have you ever heard of Anne Rice?" And I said, "No." Well, that's not true. I had, but peripherally, because like my
Right.
uncles and my cousins read her. I mean,
Mhm.
so she was in my home life, like in my family. I saw her on the shelf, but I was like, Anne Rice. I thought she was like Maeve Binchy at the time. You know what I mean? Like I was
Right.
just like whoever. So then she was like, "Well, you're too young for it," which of course then I was like, listening. And she was like, but she wrote this novel, Interview with the Vampire. She writes all the things you
Oh,
love. She goes, an Interview with the Vampire is written from the vampire's point of view. And that is
mhm.
all I ever loved as a child. Like my favorite vampire movies were when you were hanging out with the vampire versus the humans who end up killing the vampire. Like,
Mhm. The
you get
monsters.
mostly a
Yeah.
lot of equal footing, and those were also my favorite. You got like equal time with each. But of course,
Sure.
all I wanted was just to always be with the vampire.
Me
And
too. Me too.
so she was like, "You're too young, whatever." I was like 9. We had just moved to this other part of town, in the same side of town, but a different name part of it, different part of the neighborhood. Um,
Mhm.
that there was close to the library, so I could just walk to it literally from home, like walk to the library. So I go do that as soon as I get home. I get off the school bus, and then I go straight to the library. I just don't even drop off my bag. I walk past my house and just keep going to the library, and I go straight to the card catalog, pull up
Mm-hmm.
handwrite, and they had one copy left, which had just been checked back in because at that time, 94, Anne was at the top. So it was like you would have to be on a waiting list for months to
To
check out a
get
book.
her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to
She
check a
was
book out
huge.
of the library. You could be waiting for, you could be on that thing for months before you could check out one book because
Mm-hmm.
everybody was just waiting for a copy. And, you know, you go check other libraries, and of course, other branches were out as well. But they had one that had just got put back on the shelf. I snatched it up, checked it out, and it changed my life in every
Mm-hmm.
way. In every way, I will never be able to repay her.
No, I
And
absolutely understand that 100%. Mm-hmm.
I I was like, holy crap, writing can do that. Like, she made me smell everything in a way no writer had, or heard things, felt like just the poetry. And I was like, I want to do this. And
That's your calling.
yeah. And so from
That was
there,
it.
I just became obsessed and learned, watched every interview she ever did, really heard her story. I bought her biographies on VHS and
Mm-hmm.
her documentaries
Way
and what she
before
talked.
social media.
Yeah,
Way before social
and
media.
way before. And what she taught me and what I learned was basically how to do it. So I learned you had to go buy Writer's Marketplace, which was this
Mm-hmm.
huge, huge book. It was like the size
Thick.
of the Webster Dictionary.
Yes,
And you
it
would
is.
go to Barnes and Noble, Borders, whatever. It came out every year. And it was the directory of every agent, publisher, magazine, every fan club, every library, every damn thing that could exist. The contact, it was all there. It was updated every
Mm-hmm.
year. And
Beautiful book too. Yeah.
I just set to sending out query letters, doing
Like it
the
was candy. Like the
doing the
Benjamins.
grunt work. Yep. Buying the stamps, spending at the time, I would have to drop, I was dropping like half my paychecks on stamps
Mm-hmm.
and manila envelopes and
Yep.
printing ink and paper. Um, but that's how I did it. I did it. The internet was, there was LiveJournal, and there was MySpace was just starting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was
With
in that
time
in
for
between
MySpace.
time where I got to experience the the I really got the chance to experience publishing how it had been since the beginning of the publishing industry
For
up
so many
until
years before, but
right.
thanks in part to Anne Rice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So
That you found your calling. You found a new skill. You taught yourself how to become a horror author,
yep.
and then you also took part in the query letters and trying to get an agent and getting published way before a Twitter X, a LinkedIn, a Facebook, getting
Oh
yourself
yeah.
on camera. This was hard work, and I remember working in publishing myself, where we didn't even have we had a marketing team, but a very small team before a MySpace even took off, or a Hot or Not, or a Facebook,
Yeah.
or even an Instagram. There was none of
Yeah.
that. The job in publishing was to get act as a publicist and get the authors out by word of mouth.
Yeah.
There was
And
no
that's
social media whatsoever.
I yeah, I know it was crazy. Like I remember when my second novel, Blackmore, came out in end of '07, or end of '06, early '07. I get it confused because the book, when I wrote it, because it's been planned, like the whole series has been planned out. So when I
Yes.
wrote it, from how so when I wanted, what year I wanted the series to end, I then had to go back and figure out when it started. So even though it came out at the end of '06, early '07, um, it was set for December of '07, going into '08.
Mhm. Sure.
So I'll confuse when I talk about, because I'll be like, I'll confuse when the book was set from when it came out. So in
Right.
end of '06, '07, when it came out, um, I went and I worked a bunch of overtime hours, and I was working in call centers. I've done so much work in call centers, I can't even talk about it. I am like a lifer of call centers. I'm like, people on the phone cannot screw with me. Like, I have been
I
there.
know shame
Just
in
do what
that.
I tell you to
Mhm.
do. I know you can.
No shame in that.
Like, I'm not an idiot. Um, but it was open 24/7. And so you could
Oh.
book overtime hours. So I
Mhm.
basically moved in to my job and like
Yeah.
only went home to like walk and feed the dogs and spend some time with them and say
Then
hi
you
to my
went back.
partner at the time. And then I would be
Yeah.
back at the call center working and sleeping in the break room on intervals and shit to raise money to promote the book. And when it finally came out, one of the things I did was I bought, I can't even remember how, it was like $3,000, but I spent
Oof.
3K on, like, I think it was 2.5 or 3 million promotional cards for Blackmore. Like,
I
then
believe it.
I just
It was a tough
took
business back
out
then
the
too in
white
publishing.
pages, the national white pages,
Right.
and I ran the entire list, and I basically went through the entire alphabet and picked X amount from every state, every major city, and I just figured it out. And then I spent um, probably like 4 or 5 days filling out and full all of these envelopes and then sending out these promo cards to
Yeah.
random people throughout the entire country.
Just to get the word out about the project.
Correct.
So
I'm
here's
a
a question.
hustler.
Girl, I know you are, and you inspire not only me as as all these things that I mentioned, but a lot of people in the queer community as well. But here's another question. I love
Yeah.
hearing the beginning, right? It's like the old pony trail, right? The old
Yeah.
how to get things like down the railroad. Literally, it was like that back then.
Yeah.
But now that you're continuing to publish works, and I want to get into that in a moment, how do you feel that social media for you specifically and which platforms? I want the audience to really take note of
Yeah.
this. Do you promote on now versus how do you feel now versus when you started off without social media whatsoever? I'm
Sure.
assuming, I mean, I know the answer being in this world myself, but we need to hear what's the evolution now that you can utilize all these different free platforms.
So for me, I have found, first of all, technology always eludes me. Um, I am so uh, a child of the '90s. It's not even funny.
Mhm.
Technology, and this kind of goes back to with my learning disabilities, that technology can
Mhm.
just get very frustrating for me.
Sure.
But I'll learn it. I'll fucking learn it. And I do. It's just it's a hard one. But what I found was, MySpace at the time, and this is kind of the evolution. So MySpace, um, LiveJournal was going out the door. Everyone was hopping over to MySpace. Got to MySpace,
Correct.
that started becoming a little easier because you could do all the fun things to theme your page and stuff with music, and you could just do all these things that were made it more inviting for people to come to check you out.
So
And then, more people were still reading books at the time, so they would go to the contributors of like the anthologies, and there would be like your
yeah,
handle, so then people would go to that. um and then uh with but you couldn't advertise, and then Facebook was still so social. When Facebook first happened, there wasn't
mhm.
even really a way to use Facebook. Like, I remember '07, like '08, '09, Like,
Yep.
there was no, Facebook was still like Animal Farm and people like posting just their family. It was a positive, happy
Correct.
place that I kind of wish we could go back to now. I'm like,
It was.
if
It
only
was.
we had
But
known now.
as far as MySpace is concerned, though, Marcus, I remember you could, drawing it back to how I assist my students, right, and my team now in building personas. It was a great exercise in building personas back on
It was.
MySpace. You were
And that's
talking
what I
about
did. I was
and the
able to
skin.
cultivate, I was able to
Mhm.
cultivate Marcus James.
Yes,
And,
I was going with that exactly.
and that's just, and Marcus James is literally just my first and middle name. That's it. Um,
But that's your
but
brand from the beginning.
yeah, I just didn't like growing up, whenever I got, I said something out of line, I was abrasive, I get Marcus James. So I have always associated that kind of as like my rebellious shield. And then, I didn't like my actual last name. I just didn't like it. So
Sure.
there's nothing really more behind it other than I just didn't like the sound of it. I didn't like the way it looked on a book. I had
That's
like
what
books
felt right.
write it out.
That's what felt right.
So,
Yeah.
and then from there, I developed who Marcus James was. Um, and MySpace was able to do that because I could curate the images. Whenever I did like I did a racy photo shoot for a magazine in Mexico, and
Mhm.
I put one of the images as my background wallpaper of my MySpace page. So you just went
Mhm.
in, it was this racy black and white of me in undies and a Burberry polo and all this branded crap. And it was just, it was there. And I could create, and people could then associate who Marcus James was. And especially in the queer publishing world and in the queer media world, there is
Mhm.
power in our rebellion. There is
There always
power.
has been. There always has been, but also
Correct.
within writing horror, writing the
Yes.
monsters as
Yes.
well at the same time. Hmm.
And I almost see it as, if you're going to get like theological with it and a Christian, Judeo-Christian view of it, I would say like, the world always already sees us as fallen, as damned. So I think when I think of that, I think of Paradise Lost. I think of the rebellion of the angels. And then I think of, the lithograph illustrations for Paradise Lost and all those beautiful, gorgeous angels falling from heaven, so erotic and tangled in each other. And I have just always seen us as the sacred and the profane. Like,
Hmm.
it's like our book convention, Saints and Sinners in New Orleans. Like,
Yes.
there is sacred in the profane, and there is a rebellion in our decadence and our survival. And I I've always worn that so proudly, and
Hmm.
MySpace helped cultivate that is who Marcus James is. As an author, as an activist,
Building
this
your
is who
personal
he
brand
is.
from the ground up,
Right.
really taking a claim to your persona on how you want to be perceived on the internet that will lead to where you are today.
Yes. And then as soon as I got to once Facebook really became the thing and it started
Mhm.
moving away from being just personal friends and family, cute, but really
Cute,
started
yeah.
allowing for creating, having official fan pages, having
Cool.
things that you could create community with in a way that you couldn't on MySpace. The first thing
Mhm.
I did then was, of course, create my official fan page. And that was, back in 11, 12. Um,
That's about right.
and, I was able to ride that Facebook wave of promotion, networking, and then I was able to, uh, when they started allowing for ads, then I started running an
Mhm.
ad for my fan page first. So before running ads for books, I would run an ad for my fan page. And then in between, and then usually because I could only afford one or the other, I would then have to switch and run ad for a book. And
It would
then
get a little crazy too at the same time
when
at
that was
that
done,
time.
go back to promoting the fan
Yeah.
page. Um, then so now Facebook I've utilized because I have an audience there of a few thousand. But I don't run ads on it anymore. It's a waste of money. No one pays attention. Things don't automatically play. Instagram is really that.
I was just going to get there. And my follow-up question to you, because I love the rebellion as a marketing technique. How do you utilize that now in promoting your newer works? The rebellion as a marketing technique.
Well, I do things like I go on a lot of podcasts. I I do a lot of I do book signings. I do a lot of public events. I'm in a lot of I have been getting I get featured in magazines here and there, which is nice. But I always make sure that I'm staying on top of social issues are really important to me. I'm an activist. I've been an activist longer than I've been a writer. I helped start Washington State's first ever Gay Straight Alliance. I helped end clinical conversion therapy in Washington State back in 2017, 2018.
Sure.
I've just been a lifelong activist and sex positive, especially when it comes to HIV/AIDS stigma. I just was affected by it when I was 8. I was just affected by it as a young kid in a profound way that then made me become very much an advocate for it in my youth and for higher education and sex education and sex positivity. And so now on Instagram, the things I do, like for example, I still have racy pics. And it's nice because it allows you to curate. Instagram allows you to curate your image in a way Facebook and MySpace didn't. We now, of course, have smartphones that work almost as good as professional cameras. You have, selfie sticks now and stands, ring lights. You have all these things where you can now really cultivate and curate your brand and your image in a way that back before that, you had to cross fingers that your publicist booked you with a magazine that's going to send a photographer or you're going to get asked to be in a campaign or whatever.
You were at the mercy of somebody else. And now this powerful little device, you can do everything.
Yeah. You can literally do whatever. Yeah.
And you can literally get shit done on your own faster than you ever could have back in 2007 to 2012 or so.
Yeah. And I never had luck with Twitter. It was just too much to keep up with. It was just okay, I'm posting on Facebook. Now I have to go tweet something. And then I have to go make sure I'm taking a picture for my Instagram. I have to go do all these things. And then as time kept going, the amount of time you had to do that in a day increased. And it couldn't just be one picture. It couldn't be just one post. It had to be more and more. And Twitter was just one of those that I would just forget about it. I would forget I had it because Facebook was working so great for me. Instagram was such a relief from Facebook because Facebook had gotten so negative all the time.
A completely different platform at the time. There were two different platforms.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Instagram was just pictures. It was just pictures everywhere. And so I found that I was able to curate an audience and a brand on Instagram better than even Facebook.
Exactly.
And then I could promote myself in my day-to-day life and kind of what it means to just be a queer writer and what that looks like. And I could do all that on Instagram in a way that invited more people in.
Your persona while promoting and selling at the same time.
Yeah. What's funny, though, is that it has led to more followers, but not on Instagram. They go follow me on my Facebook. They go to my official fan page and follow that. And which I'm not mad about. I don't base things on, I want you to follow me because you want to, not because I bought it or something. Like if you want
That
to be
will also
if you
lead to
want to follow me, you
conversion
follow me.
in sales for your books. That's also another reason that will eventually lead there.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
follow, and then you build your persona, and they will come.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's it.
And with Instagram, I get to, I get to run ads. I'm a huge fan of ads.
Mhm.
Ads are vital. Um, and there's so many great assists out there like Canva, Clipchamp, like just all these amazing
Canva's
things.
amazing. Definitely,
Um,
my full recommendation is to invest the $13 a month in the Canva platform, and you're
mhm.
unlocked so many different other avenues in that aspect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fun. It's great because the thing is like it doesn't matter what level of success you are as a writer now. It's
Right.
changed. The publisher, unless you're a Patterson, unless you're Stephen King, unless you are a huge bankable name,
A Christopher
you
Rice
can
or a
still
New
be
York
a
Times
bestseller.
put something in
You can
books.
still
Yeah.
be a bestseller. You could have several books on the New York Times bestseller list. But if
Sure.
you are not that like name, you are having to pay for your own marketing. You are paying for your own promotion. The
And most
publisher
people
doesn't
don't
do that
realize
anymore.
that, Marcus. Most people are not even on. I mean, I'm going to
No, they
call it
think
what
the
it is.
publisher pays for everything still.
My first book with my partner, 2011, we did all our PR and marketing ourselves.
Yeah, you have.
They did
It's
not pay. No.
no, it's not what it was, because for good and bad, things like being able to just self-publish if you want to, without any, and like I'm not going to crap on self-publishing, indie publishing at all, like at all. Um,
Yeah.
my issue with it is I feel like there should have been some gatekeeping in terms of like some I don't know, some type of some type of validation or acknowledge that you know what you're doing, like
Yeah.
um
But there's
because
power in that too. Power and rebellion in learning the ropes on your own, like we had to do back in the day before marketing was a
correct,
thing.
but my what happened was, and what kind of saturated the industry, the market got super saturated really fast.
Mhm.
um but you had people who they just wanted people to read their books, so they made them free and made them 99 cents. And what ended up
Sure.
happening is, which again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. None of that. But what ended up happening on the traditional end, and this is what people need to understand, is there's two sides to every coin. So as much as, and I'm all about like, if you want to write a book, you got a story, you get it out there however you want to get it out there. Sell it on the freaking street
Exactly.
out of a paper bag. Um,
Hmm.
but you have to also understand, though, the cause and effect. So, because there's no longer this elite gatekeeping or the literati or whatever that's doing
Yeah,
all this and
exactly.
saying who can be published and who can't, and then the market getting so many books oversaturated by indie authors who so many of them made them free or made them 99 cents, sometimes for
Hmm.
4 or 5 books. Um,
Yeah.
it the money there was it took out the money from the industry, and because people weren't paying the same prices, the same costs for books, publishers to keep up had to lower their prices on digital and on to keep, and so what ended up happening was that money that the publishing house, again, you know for good and bad, but they gained all this money. Well, that all left, and that money was used. Okay, we get the big banked authors, and then we can use
Yeah.
what's left to promote our mid-level and smaller niche authors. Well, that left, and so then all the money they had to go all to the big people,
Hmm.
and so now, unless you're a huge name, and I mean a huge, huge name. So if you're like Donna Tartt, if you're Jodi Picoult, whatever, you're still paying for your book tour. You are paying for your publicity. Your publishing
Out of
company,
pocket.
yeah, they'll do a little, but they're only a little. Maybe a
And you're
month's worth.
looking on your social media on yourself as well.
Yeah. And
You could
that's
very
it's
well
all
be
you.
missing out, unfortunately, on all of that. Getting yourself on Reels, even getting on Twitter X is there's a renaissance still evolving. I'm a big proponent
Yeah.
of Twitter X. LinkedIn is a different audience where the money is, and then you have Facebook groups.
Yeah.
And you have all these, questionnaires and polls and everything else in which you can utilize to get the word out about your works. And you should be. Like you, us, Gen Pop in general.
Yeah, and I have found that so if you want to go, so it's just you have to understand that like authors, it's not the way it was.
No.
You have to be willing to do everything and anything. And you have to be willing to put in the time. You have to learn how to, like I said, I'm not great at technology at all. I had to learn all these programs. Now, people I know come to me and are like, can you make an ad image for me? Can you teach me how to put together a trailer? Can you do all this stuff? And I that's very surprising because I wouldn't have expected that I would have gotten that good at it. But
No.
I was like, this is my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how
you
you
learn how to
treat it.
do it.
Yeah.
Or just for those listening, you can also hire a marketing company like J. Federico Marketing to assist, but also teach you in case we part ways to learn how to do it, because it is very feasible. It's very affordable, but it is well worth it to get your truest story out there.
It's just a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Yes.
It's worth it at the end, because look where you are now. Look where I am. These are beautiful stories that we come from nothing.
Yeah.
Especially in the queer community, there's rebellion and power in that too, Marcus.
Exactly. 100%.
Hands down. So unfortunately, we're running out of time. I will definitely have you on 3, 4, 5, 12 more times, I promise, in the future of the Pride and Promotion podcast. But as we're wrapping up this amazing episode, can you tell us where we can find your books and find you on all the social platforms, please?
Yes. So you can always find me at marcusjamesbooks.com. And then on social, on Instagram, I'm at Marcus James Author.
Mm-hmm.
My official Facebook is capital M, capital J, AMES, writer. Yes, writer.
Perfect.
And then I think I'm Marcus James Author on TikTok. That's another one that I'm like, I'm trying. I think I might be old. And then you can obviously find my books literally anywhere, any bookstore, any venue. I prefer bookshop.org. You can find all my books on bookshop.org, and that the proceeds from every sale on that site go to keeping open independent bookstores and funding them. Obviously, you can get my stuff on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, whatever, but bookshop.org would be the best place.
Simply amazing. Thank you so much, Marcus James, for coming on the show. Everybody, I'm your host, Joe Federico. This is another episode of Pride and Promotion Podcast, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
And just like that, we're putting the finishing touches on another fabulous episode of the Pride and Promotion Podcast. If today's conversation struck a chord, why not sing our praises with a quick rating and review on your podcast platform of choice? Your support is the spotlight that helps us shine and bring more folks into our ever-expanding audience. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Let's get social too. Follow us online for all the extra goodies, sneak peeks, and continued dialogue about marketing with pride and purpose. Tune in next time as we unfurl more colorful stories, champion the cause of inclusivity, and learn more from the creme de la creme of the industry. Until our paths cross again, keep pushing boundaries, stay true to yourself, and infuse every project with pride.